Well, it's good to be with you again, and I want to share a few more verses from St. Luke's Gospel, this time from Luke 5, following on from last week, Luke 5:12, where Jesus heals a man. A town where there was a man who was suffering from a dreaded skin disease. When he saw Jesus, he threw himself down and begged him, "Sir, if you want to, you can make me clean." And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him. "I do want to," he answered. "Be clean." At once the disease left the man. And Jesus ordered him, "Don't tell anyone, but go straight to the priest and let him examine you. And then, to prove to everyone that you are cured, offer the sacrifice as Moses ordered." Well, that's just a few verses. Tremendous, straightforward little story, a cryptic story. The leper comes to Jesus, the Greek says, and there appeared on the scene, essentially, a leper. He comes, he kneels before Jesus. He asks him to do a miracle in his life, to cleanse him. And Jesus does. He completely heals him in every way, body, mind, spirit, whatever way, and sends him off to register the fact and to start living the new reality. This, as you would expect, is not just a story in the Bible about a man who was a leper all that long time ago. It is to speak to us. And I would encourage you this morning to learn from this and to think, there's something here from that place at that time that the Lord wants to speak to me about, because this leper is a great example to us. And I want to ask you just some basic things that we can learn from this passage. First of all, what kind of things does he show us that we can bring to the Lord? What sort of things could you bring to the Lord for him to sort for you today or this week? How might you do that? See how he does it. See what is implied by him bringing this and asking for a miracle. What does Jesus do when he comes? And how does he have to take on board what Jesus has done? Yeah. What can you bring? How do you bring it? What does Jesus do? How do you respond to it? First of all, then, what can you bring? Well, the answer to that, surprisingly, is anything. But it's quite cryptic. It's not just about sickness. Clearly, the man is seriously ill. It says in the Greek, he was full of leprosy. And that's a very degenerating disease. Literally, he would have been sadly falling to pieces and would have been terminally ill. It was painful. It was unpleasant. Everything was bad about it. But it means that if he can bring that to Jesus for a miracle to be changed, then in one way or another, it is open to all of us. We don't need to do it. It's all open to us to bring any physical ailment, whether it is toothache, arthritis, or whether it is some sort of terrible disease, something like motor neuron disease, because in those days, leprosy was the motor neuron disease of the time. You got it, you deteriorated, you died. So whether it's a big thing or a small thing, this is clearly open to us. Bring your need, just as he brought his need to Jesus, and seek a miracle. But leprosy is interesting because in Jesus' time, it was not just seen like being lame as a physical ailment. Lepers were judged to be unclean, to be impure, and thus be unacceptable to God. And so the man also feels, and would have been taught and knew from everybody and all the peer group pressure and his religion, that he was unacceptable to God. He was beyond the pale, if you like. We can thus also bring anything which stands between us and God, which is distancing ourselves. He wasn't allowed to go to the synagogue. He was not allowed to go to the temple, symbolically. He was away from God. He was impure. We normally consider that to be sin. And so again, we come and we seek forgiveness for our sins. But then that is a healing. That is a miracle as well, you see. But between these two, because leprosy was seen as dangerous, which it was, and that you could catch it, it was contagious. they were shunned. There was enforced personal distancing. You either went to a leper colony or went in the wilderness somewhere, or you certainly put out the way where you were out of sight and out of mind. There was drastic social distancing. And so when he comes not only with the spiritual problems and the physical problems, but with the social interpersonal problems. And that's reinforced by the fact that people didn't want to meet him, not just because they didn't want to catch leprosy, but because they didn't want to be made impure in a ritualistic way. So perhaps you have things, we have things we need to bring to the Lord, which are about our relationships, our interpersonal relationships, the sociology of the situation. So you really have a spectrum. At one end, you've got the spiritual. At the other end, you've got the physical. But in the middle, you've got all those social, psychological aspects of life. In other words, this leper brings the whole spectrum with him. And we can bring the whole spectrum with us. Anything out of that spectrum, one end to the other, you could bring it this week, today, to the Lord. Now you might say, well, yes, but we don't believe anymore that leprosy causes you to be unclean. We do not. But if you look at the beginning of the Bible, with the fall, when mankind fell away from God, what do we have? What are the problems there? The problems are a separation from God. He's cast out of Eden by sin. Separation from one another, social distancing. Adam and Eve immediately fall out. But also, there is the sense in which the creation, we're told in the New Testament, is fallen away. And so that although Jesus is very firm that there's no direct line necessarily between somebody's sin and their illness. Remember the blind man, he's not a sinner, he's just being born blind. Although that is not true, it is true that all the bad things that happen to us in terms of illness are part of a fallen creation that, as in Romans 8 says, is waiting for the redemption of the sons of God. So this leper is not a leper necessarily because he's a sinner, he's done a bad sin, but because he's suffering as part of a fallen creation, a fallen world. And so generally in the Bible, these things are all joined up. It's not just superstition. And so the message is for us, what can I bring to the Lord? You can bring any of those things. The sins for which you need forgiveness, the sociology and the interpersonal relationships that need healing, and anything in your physical life. And these things clearly interact with one another because it's not just this, and this. We are joined up people. This whole business about social distancing is actually just a geographical thing. It's just a bit of geometry. Go a meter or 2 meters away. But it's not become that. It's become a matter of fear. It's become a matter of phobia, of exclusion, of loneliness, of all sorts of things that are causing different sorts of problems. Just as people who are ill, it will affect the way they feel about themselves and often the way they feel about God. And sin can make our relationships bad. People who live with limp often walk with a limp, as they say. It's a joined up thing. Today, think, what can I bring? This leper says something like this. You could bring anything, because I brought the whole lot. You don't need to bring everything now, but you could bring anything. And why not bring something to the Lord? So that's what you can bring. What can we learn from the very simplicity of the way that he comes? When he does come, and obviously I'm going to say something like, he comes and asks for a miracle because he's got faith. Well, he does have faith. You can't get away from that. We need faith. But just pick it apart a little bit more and just feel around in what there may be within the envelope of faith. Because firstly, I think the man has courage. He comes. He's not supposed to come. Lepers don't go into town and they don't come near to holy rabbis, but he does, you see. And this courage, it seems to me, is not just that he risks problems with the crowd, but he risks his whole life with this. Because if he's been a leper for any length of time, and he probably has if he's full of leprosy, then he will have got used to being a leper. He won't be happy with it, but he will live somewhere. He will get by somehow. And he will have got used to the idea that he is a leper, that he can't meet anybody. He gets by on a few scraps that they give him, and he will get worse and he will die. And it is not nice, but you will reach some kind of accommodation. lepers did live before they died. In other words, by the way he has a lifestyle of getting by, he is treating his problem what I would call conservatively. All right? He's come to terms with a situation and learned to live with it. Because leprosy was quite common in those days, you see. But when he decides to go to Jesus, that's all out the window. Now there is a fresh hope. Now there is a risk, because there's a chance he could be healed. He could be changed. And all that's up in the air. I'm not worried about where I'm going to get my scraps anymore from. I'm not worried about just now where I live or whatever it is. That's gone. That's gone. He abandons old sureties, miserable as they might be, and he throws all before Jesus. Because if it hadn't come off, if Jesus had rejected him or hadn't healed him, or it had all been a failure, it would have been much worse, because he would have, all those expectations would be raised and then dashed, and despair would be much worse than what he'd become used to, and his faith in God would have just gone out the window. I think we need this kind of courage, because whatever of these problems we have on this spectrum, from the spiritual to the physical, we do tend to come to terms with them, don't we? I have a sin I tend to always fall for, and then I ask for forgiveness, and I come to think, well, I'm sorry, but that's just me. I've come to terms with it. I've accommodated it. I'm dealing with it conservatively and trying to minimize it. I have a bad relationship with somebody, but we've come to terms with it. So we know things we don't bring up in conversation, and we don't meet very often. When we do, we are polite, and we are civilized, and we don't have major rows. It's not nice, but we've got a system for it. But if you then say to, and then that could be disturbed by fresh hope, you see. And even in physical things, something that hurts or aches or causes you problems, you might think, well, you can't do about this, so I've got to live around it. So I've got some strategies for dealing with, some people who help me, and I do this and this, and I've come to terms with it. I'm still living my life. I wish I didn't have it, but I did. And in each of those cases, a major courage needed to bring it to the Lord, because it disturbs this, you see. I don't want to go through this sin and think about repentance and bring that up and feel guilty about it in the hope that I can be forgiven. You see, what if I'm not forgiven? I feel just as bad. I'm going to feel worse. At least it's in the background. And this relationship, if I say, okay, there's a real chance that we could make a change, make a new beginning, or something could happen, am I going to risk a radical conversation which disturbs the rather uneasy status quo and might make things worse? You see, there's a hope, but there's a risk. And with my illness, do I want to see if something can be done about it, which, because again, will disturb me. Do I want to go to the doctor? It might hurt even more. He might do something that makes it worse, and it might not come off. And my hopes have been raised and my hopes have been dashed. And above all, as a Christian, I believed such and such, and I was living with that belief. Now I've hoped more, and I've been let down, and I feel worse. You can see the point. You need that courage. I would encourage you this morning to come out of this one thing and say, I will abandon some old surety, because honestly, it's quite miserable. And I will risk something, and I will bring it to Jesus with a faith that he can do something miraculous about it. It takes courage. He does that. We could do that. He also has a very straightforward confidence. He is an impressive man. He believes that Jesus can do a miracle. Now, this basic belief is at the core of faith. I believe that you can do this. And I believe you can do a miracle. Now, a miracle is something which is changed by God's power. It's a power encounter. Let's make no mistake about it. When he is healed, that is physics. Quantum mechanics is involved, and his skin is healed. Everything happens. His biochemistry changes, as well as all the other things about his ritual cleanliness and rehabilitation in society. There is here a major miraculous change. The furniture has changed. His life has changed. His world has changed. And he comes and he asks for that. Somehow we need to be able, at the core, to accept that we need to ask the Lord for a miracle and have a calm confidence that he will answer us. And that is not all easy. Not at all easy at all. But that's what I need to be aiming for. Come and ask. Jesus says, ask, seek, knock. We're told, cast all your cares on him. What are the cares? What do you want? I'm going to tell you, Lord. I believe, help thou my unbelief. Holy Spirit, speak through me that I may believe. But you still need that. You can't get around that. Let me just give you a few thoughts I had about why I have trouble about this coming in faith like the leper did. That's the New Testament, but this is me, and I don't work like that for me. As somebody who's had many answers to prayer and seen many miracles, I still find it difficult. And I think I find it difficult because I narrow down what miracles are. And I finish up with just desperate situations that need, as we say, a miracle. We're praying for a miracle. This guy needed a miracle. It was obvious he needs a miracle. But if I just narrow it down to these, this is inoperable. This is terminal. My financial situation is catastrophically collapsed and I am nothing. My relationship is destroyed. There's no room in the lifeboat and the boat is sinking. If I just keep, that is very, very difficult because I create something which I say these are miracles or not. I think that's very challenging. We need to pray in those situations, but I think we need to broaden out what we consider to be a miracle. Well, I was saying my prayers the other day, thinking about this, I thought everything I ask for in my prayers is actually asking for a miracle, but I don't see it like that, you see. I just think it's an intercessory prayer or petitionary prayer. So even in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us this day, forgive us our trespasses. Asking for forgiveness, that is asking for a miracle, something in the universe changes. Give us this day our daily bread. How am I going to be better off today and tomorrow because of this prayer? Only because there will be something changed. I will be provided for in a slightly different way than if I hadn't prayed for it. There is a miracle there. Deliver me from evil. Am I less likely to be at the mercy of evil having prayed it? I'm asking for a miracle. I have a friend lives far away who's got a form of cancer, and I'm praying that the Lord will heal him. I need a miracle for that. But I say you've got somebody else who's going for an interview. You pray that the interview should go well. Perhaps you even pray that they should pass the interview. That's a miracle for them and for the panel, and all sorts of things are going on there in a miracle. You pray you're going to have a good day. Lord, bless me this day. Does that mean the day is going to be different because you prayed it? You're asking for a miracle, and so on and so on and so on. This is not saying, as some liberal theologians would say, oh, that's not what miracles about. And they want to water down miracles to sort of something less radical, less ambitious. It's broadening it out that, yes, he prays for his leprosy, and he prays for his cleanliness, and he prays for his acceptance in society. But that's not just the only prayers that we will pray and know that they are miracles. I think, to be honest, if I was to see I'm asking for small miracles, I would be better equipped for the mega miracles and to be able to come with confidence. And I think not only do we want to broaden out what is a miracle and what we're asking for, but not narrow it down this side, so that I tend to think that miracles at the spiritual, abstract, non-material end are easier than the miracles at this physical end. You know? Jesus does not touch the man and say, you are blessed, my son, and from now on, lepers will no longer be unclean. Like he said about food. By saying this, Jesus declared all foods to be clean. He doesn't say that about the leper. Because if he had, well, they may have had a different attitude to the leper, but the leper would still have had leprosy. You see? Because that would give the impression that somehow doing something cultic, something religious, something spiritual, and declaring this man to be clean whilst he was still a leper is an easier kind of miracle, because really leprosy is a terminal condition, a terminal problem with the skin. Is biochemistry. It's very difficult down that end. We have a tendency to do this, I think, and yet it's all joined up. As with this leper, he teaches us, he brings the whole thing to the Lord, and he wants a holistic miracle. a miracle dealing with the whole thing, physical, emotional, spiritual, what have you. I think let's not narrow that down. Some miracles will be spiritual, abstract, existential. We need our minds changed on things, and it doesn't really affect the outside world. It only affects the way we see the outside world. But lots of other things, whether it's our body or the outside world, we need miracles where the furniture moves. Many years ago now, I was in the Canadian Rockies with some soldiers, and I was actually supposed to be commanding them, and we were on a sort of a big trek in the real wilds. Now, this was not an area with roads and lay-bys and camper vans. This had nothing, but it did have bears. And it was not a bear reserve, it just had bears, and they ate people. And we were briefed on this, you see, about the dangers of it. And it was tangible dangers. And so you want to be really careful of these bears because they will attack you. And rather humorously, they said, we are going to give you, and this was realistic, we will give you all a little plastic circle with bells on. You see, you put it on top of your rucksack as you walk along, it rings, and it alerts the bears that you're coming, and they don't like being shocked and scared. That's when they attack you. And you hear the little bells, they just mooch off somewhere else. So you think, all right, that's not too bad. And then this guy who was doing the instructions said, and you can tell when bears are in the area by examining the droppings. You know that it's not an elk, for instance, but it's a bear, because if you look in the droppings, bear droppings tend to have pieces of plastic and fragments of bell in them. And I'm thinking, it's no good, is it? So I'm scared. So I'm get out there in the middle of nowhere with these soldiers who I'm leading. Now, as a Christian, what do I pray? See, well, whatever I pray, it's going to be for a miracle, isn't it? But it's the whole range of things, you see. If I pray, Lord, I just pray that I should not be scared of these bears. I need something in here. The Lord will do something and give me his peace. Passes all understanding, but it's still a miracle, and it's still something to do with my biochemistry. But it will also probably make me a better leader so that I respond better to seeing a bear and I don't do something silly that makes the situation worse. So that's a good knock-on miracle, isn't it? But what if I pray, Lord, I pray that you protect me from these bears? That involves the bears. That's very physical. And the Lord who made the bears presumably deals with the bears. And that's a different sort of miracle, isn't it? You see, they're all mixed up. It really doesn't matter. And what if I'm in an area where actually, unbeknown to me, there are no bears? And I say, Lord, I pray that you will give me confidence to go through this area. He will give me the confidence, but he won't bother with the bears because they're not there. So right along this spectrum, from the abstract, the spiritual, right through the social, right through to the physical, it's all joined up. It's a whole range. It's not easy up this end, as we used to sometimes think in church. We're just doing an easy miracle over here, just changing your mind about something. No, over there is changing the furniture. Let's come with a quiet confidence. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And say, Lord, whatever this is I'm asking for, it's going to be a miracle. I need you to change the furniture of my life and change things, whatever. But I'm asking. So it's courage, confidence, but also just very briefly, you've got humility. He kneels down, which is not easy and probably not even comfortable for somebody who's very sore and got very bad skin and joints and everything. But he does. That's his attitude. And what is wonderful about this man, he says, if you want to, you can heal me. He manages to get a sense of humility, which avoids any idea of telling what Jesus wants to do. He's not arrogant. He's not demanding. And yet he does that without watering down his confidence. If you can get humility, which gets you in the right place without watering down your confidence, then you'll be like this guy. We used to have a thing in the church, didn't we, where everybody prayed, if it be your will. Well, that's a good prayer, but it was really a cop-out, wasn't it? If nothing happens, we're covered and it doesn't destroy our confidence in God. And very often nothing did happen because we were just whistling in the dark. This man is not like that. But we need a bit of openness. We need to bring it to the Lord and see what he will do. What is Jesus going to do? He will hear our request, but he doesn't necessarily do what we want him to do. So I think we need that humility. God could do something different. God could do something better. God could do something more than you ever thought. But also with the humility, you will protect yourself from giving God an agenda which he does not follow and from which you are hugely disappointed. Oh Lord, you must look after my grandchildren. Don't say that. Say, Lord, if you want to, you can look after my grandchildren, please. If you want to, you can heal me. Please do. Humility. So, what can you ask for? The whole spectrum. How do you do it? You do it with courage. You do it with confidence. You do it with humility. Then what does Jesus do? Well, what Jesus does, he shows us his heart. He says, I want to. He's not, God is there for you. God wants to bless you. God is so happy that you've come. He doesn't say, well, this is a rather scruffy looking leper. I'm not sure. No, he wants to. But he goes more, it's not just he wants to, but he can. There's lots of people who want to help us. Doctors want to help us, but they'll say, but it's a problem. An accountant will say, yeah, I'll help you with your finances, but it has a problem. There might be somebody we want to get on better with, and they say, yeah, I think we can probably make a fresh start, but we've got some big problems. Jesus does not say, leprosy is a bit difficult. Like when I went to a healing meeting many years ago, and the man, a lovely man, said, how can I help you? I said, I've got a backache. I'd like to pray for my back. He said, I will pray for it. Backs are very difficult. Jesus doesn't say that to us. He wants to embrace us. He wants to hold. He wants to do something, and he can do something. Very good news. And then he does it. He reaches out, and there's a power encounter. He touches this man, and he heals him. And that's just what we were talking about. Something happens. The physics happens. There is divine power. His skin is healed, and that kicks on the whole restoration of this human being. Jesus reaches out to him. I want you to hear this. It means when you bring this or that to him and ask for a miracle, and know you're asking for a miracle, what he does is he reaches out to you. You come to him, but the last bit, he comes to you. He doesn't stand back from this leper like everybody else would. He comes forward to the leper and he embraces him, if you like. He touches him. Wow, nobody touches lepers. But that's the whole story of the incarnation. Jesus comes to us and embraces us and touches us. The word becomes flesh. And there's a real risk here, but he does. He embraces us with our sin and with our angst in our relationships and with our illness. He's there. He touches it. He gets in there. You say, wow, that's what it does there. That's what he'll do with you as well. And as he embraces, the power comes and the healing, the restoration, the miracle comes. The touching is symbolic, as has been said, hasn't it? The risk is for Jesus that in touching the leper, he catches the leprosy and he becomes impure and unclean. Who wants to be a rabbi who is now judged to be unclean, who nobody can come near to and be taught by? It's all a disaster waiting to happen. But that only happens if the leprosy comes up his arm from the leper to Jesus. But it doesn't, does it? Because the power encounter is that Jesus' power goes from Jesus and infects the leper with wholeness. It's a bit like in those mixer taps, is the hot water going one way or the cold water going the other? You turn them into the shower so that you've got the right temperature. With Jesus, you think it's like the hot water has got a higher pressure than the cold. The evil one that holds that man in his grip, as Jesus would have said, cannot infect Jesus, but Jesus can triumph, can overcome, can prevail, which is a good message for us if we're trying to do mission and trying to help people in Jesus' name. We need the pressure. We need the positive pressure of the Spirit so that when we touch their lives, they are changed for good rather than we are changed for bad and dragged into the whole situation. That's by the way. So Jesus will do something We don't know what he'll do, but he's going to do it, and he will do it immediately in here. A commentator said to me, of course the man wasn't healed immediately. How did she know he wasn't? Why not? Why is it easier to heal people in time than immediately? I think very often things do not change immediately, but that's because it's a better way, not a second best way. Some things that happen in my life have happened instantaneously. Jesus will reach out to you, will embrace you with all the stuff you brought. Oh, Lord, I brought this. I know, let's have this. And then he will touch you with a power encounter. And goodness knows what will happen, but it will be very good and it will be a miracle. What can we bring? Everything. How do we bring it? We bring it with courage and confidence and humility. What does Jesus do? He reaches out, embraces us, he deals with us, and he does something amazing. Just a footnote then. How do we receive it? You see, the man knew he was cleansed. He'd been declared cleansed by probably the Messiah. But Jesus sends him off to the priest, and the priest, as with the Old Testament regulations, would have looked him over. He'd got all the bandages off, he'd check him all over. It says that in the Old Testament. He could check his back where he couldn't see, and he would declare him clean. This is not just a bureaucratic declaration. It means that the man knows he's clean. When we have had God do a little miracle in our lives, we need to pick up the miracle and run with it. We need to, when we are forgiven, we need the assurance we are forgiven rather than going, I feel guilty. You know, when somebody has forgiven us, go round and have tea with them and find that they have. And when you have been healed of something, then start to move on as if you have been healed. It's an endemic problem with people who've been healed by the NHS, that they somehow subconsciously don't believe it and go on behaving as if they've still got their own aches and pains, which they were so attached to. I've done it, I know, I'm not really well. No, you're not. And so with Jesus, just as with the lame man, go home, try a bit of walking because you can do it. And then at the very tail end, Jesus says, and then go and offer a sacrifice, because that shows you pass the test with the priest, and everybody else will know. I know, you know, they need to know, because in your relationships and your whole interpersonal action, you don't need any personal distancing anymore, and they need to know. What a great agenda for today and this week. Bring to the Lord something you need him to deal with. Anything on the spectrum. Just something. And seek a miracle. Seek it with confidence. Having paid the price of disrupted everything. Go out on a limb, I've come, Lord. I've come. I believe. I'm not going to live with that anymore. I don't want it anymore. Be courageous so that you can come now and say, I need this miracle. Big, small, abstract, concrete, psychosomatic, existential, concrete. I need it. I need your help. Just come to him. It will take courage. Just pray for the confidence and do it with humility, without watering down your confidence. And what will he do? He will come. He will come to you. He will embrace you and your problems. There will be empowering encounter, and something amazing will happen. Why don't you try that this week? Let's pray together. Father, we do thank you for all your goodness to us. We thank you for the example of this wonderful man and for your graciousness to him. As we've just said, Lord, help us to come and bring whatever we need to you today or this week, across the whole spectrum. Give us the courage to leave our miserable comfort zones, our just living with it, and to step out in faith with all the risk that implies, to come with confidence and ask for a miracle, big, small, of whatever sort, and to feel your grip, your love, your power encounter, and then to receive it and recognize it and get up and walk in a new way, right with you, right with ourselves, and right with the people around us. We ask this in your precious name.